On the afternoon of July 4th, 1776, a tall Virginian stepped away from the arguing delegates in Philadelphia and checked a thermometer. His name was Thomas Jefferson. He had just finished drafting a document that would create a country. And in his private weather diary, on the very first Independence Day, he wrote down the temperature, 76 degrees Fahrenheit. A soft, comfortable summer afternoon in Philadelphia. That is how this country's birthday began, 250 years ago. This Saturday, that same country turns 250 years old, and in Philadelphia, on the anniversary of that 76-degree afternoon, the forecast is calling for 104 degrees, not heat index, actual air temperature, 28 degrees hotter than the day the nation was born. Washington is forecast to record the hottest 4th of July in its entire history. New York City just touched 100 degrees for the first time in 14 years. More than 300 temperature records are expected to fall between now and Saturday night. America has never felt this hot on its birthday, and I am going to walk you through every piece of it, hour by hour, city by city. Because if you are anywhere east of the Rockies this weekend, this forecast is about you. Let me start with what is happening right now, today, Thursday, July 2nd, because the numbers coming in this afternoon are genuinely hard to believe. Central Park in New York City officially hit 100 degrees today. Stop and think about that for a second. The last time Central Park reached triple digits was July 18th, 2012, 14 years. Kennedy Airport hit 100 as well. By 2 in the afternoon, the heat index in the city had climbed to 106 degrees, and it was still rising. If the feels-like temperature in New York touches 110 today, that puts it in rare company. Only 3 other days have done it since record-keeping began in 1943. 3 days, out of more than 80 years of observations. That is the kind of afternoon New York is living through as I record this. And New York is not alone, not even close. By 10 o'clock this morning, before most fireworks stands had even opened, the heat index had already topped 100 degrees. That was true in every single major metro from Washington to New York. Everyone. By noon, parts of Washington and Philadelphia were feeling 110. Newark went into triple-digit air temperatures early this afternoon, and in the interior of New Jersey, away from any sea breeze, heat index values are pushing 115 degrees, 115 in New Jersey, on July 2nd. Here is the scale of this thing, because I want you to understand this is not a city problem or a regional problem. The National Weather Service heat risk product puts more than 165 million Americans under major or extreme heat risk. That holds through the end of this week. Those are the top 2 categories on the scale. Extreme is the level where the National Weather Service says the heat is dangerous for everyone, not just the elderly, not just people with health conditions, everyone. Widen the lens to everybody exposed to this heat wave in some form, and the number climbs to roughly 230 million people. That is about 2 out of every 3 Americans, all sitting under the same dome of hot air during the same holiday week. The air temperatures tell one part of the story. Boston is forecast to top 100 degrees today and hover near that mark again tomorrow. Philadelphia is aiming for 103 today and 104 on Friday. Washington is expected near 103 both days. And here is the detail that stopped me cold when I ran the numbers this morning. Washington's all-time record high, the hottest temperature ever measured in the capital, is 106 degrees. This week, the city is forecast to come within 3 degrees of the hottest it has ever been. Philadelphia's all-time record is also 106. Same story. Both cities are flirting with territory they have touched only a handful of times since the 1800s. The National Weather Service in Eastern Virginia put it in terms that got my full attention. Their forecasters say this could be the region's most significant heat wave since July of 2012. I remember that event. That heat wave killed 12 people in Virginia alone, and more than 30 people across 4 states. That is the benchmark forecasters are reaching for when they describe what is happening right now. Not an average July scorcher, the worst in 14 years. So here is who needs to watch this the most. Anyone along the Interstate 95 corridor from Richmond through Washington, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and up into Boston through Saturday. Anyone in the Ohio Valley and the Mid-South, from St. Louis through Louisville and Nashville. The heat index there is running between 105 and 115. Anyone in the southeast from Atlanta down through Savannah, because the core of this heat slides your way on Sunday. and anyone, anywhere in this footprint who is older, works outside, takes medications that affect heat tolerance, or lives without reliable air conditioning. This is the group the emergency rooms will see first, and the cities know it. New York activated its full heat emergency plan and opened hundreds of cooling centers. That includes the Javits Convention Center, plus schools and libraries across the 5 boroughs. For the first time ever, the city is sending out vans staffed with nurses and paramedics. They are handing out water, electrolytes, and sunscreen on the street. Think about that. New York has never done that before, and this is the week they decided it was necessary. In Nashville, the air temperature is forecast to hit 101 and feel like 114. Heat patrols there are distributing cold bottled water to the homeless during the peak afternoon hours. Philadelphia actually shortened its Salute to Independence parade for Friday. The city hosting the country's birthday party trimmed the celebration because the air itself is too dangerous to march through. And Amtrak is slowing its trains. From Wednesday through Saturday, between 11 in the morning and 7 at night, trains across the northeast-southeast and Midwest may run at reduced speeds because extreme heat physically stresses the rails. When steel starts dictating the schedule, you know the atmosphere means business. The language coming out of city halls matches the stakes. New York's mayor called these extremely dangerous conditions for a city of more than 8 million residents. And he publicly asked every employer in the city to build flexibility into schedules. No worker should be put at risk on the job this week. When a city that runs on deadlines starts asking bosses to loosen the clock, that is a government treating the air itself as the emergency. And it should. Because everything I have shown you so far is only the setup. The main event has not even arrived yet. Now, if you are new here, my name is Arthur, and this is Sky Space Lab, where we follow the data wherever it leads. No hype, no shortcuts. If forecasts like this one matter to where you live, take 2 seconds and hit subscribe, because this weekend is going to move fast and I will be tracking every update as it comes in. That is the only ask I will make today. Now let me show you what the birthday itself looks like. Saturday, July 4th, 2026, the semi-quincentennial. 250 years of the United States. And the forecast map for that day reads like nothing this holiday has ever produced. Start with Washington, because the capital is where the record book takes its biggest hit. The forecast high for the 4th of July in Washington is 102 degrees. The hottest Independence Day ever recorded in the city is 100 degrees, and that record was set in 1919, more than a century ago. Woodrow Wilson was president. The First World War had ended 8 months earlier. That is the record Washington is forecast to break on the country's 250th birthday. And it gets deeper than that. The stretch from Thursday through Saturday may end up as the hottest 3-day run Washington has experienced since 1930. Not the hottest 3-day run in July. The hottest 3-day run, period, in 96 years. The National Mall, the fireworks over the monument, the crowds on the grass. All of it happens inside air the capital has essentially never celebrated in before. Philadelphia is next, and Philadelphia carries the symbolism here, because this is the city where the whole thing started. Friday's forecast of 104 degrees would put the city within 2 degrees of the hottest temperature ever measured there. And there is a streak in play. Philadelphia has never recorded more than 3 consecutive days at or above 100 degrees. This heat wave is threatening exactly that mark. So the city of Independence Hall could spend the 250th anniversary of the Declaration chasing its own all-time endurance record for extreme heat. Jefferson's 76-degree afternoon has never felt further away. New York City, here is your setup. If Central Park hits 100 again on Friday, after today's 100, a streak begins. It would be the city's first back-to-back triple-digit days since July of 2011. 15 years. Saturday itself pulls back slightly into the mid-90s for the 5 boroughs, but with the humidity in place, the heat index on the 4th still runs above 100. So the fireworks over the East River happen in air that feels like a sauna even after sunset, and I will come back to the after sunset part. Because that is where this event turns from uncomfortable into genuinely dangerous, and almost nobody is talking about it yet. Boston, you are in this too. 100 degrees today, close to it again Friday, with heat index values near 106. Southern New England as a whole could see triple-digit highs at times through Saturday along the Interstate 95 corridor. For a region where plenty of older homes were built without central air, that is a serious multi-day load. Now slide south and west. because the 4th is not only an East Coast story. Nashville is forecast near 101 with a feels-like temperature of 114. St. Louis has been running heat index values near 109. The Ohio Valley from Cincinnati through Louisville stays locked in the mid-90s with dew points in the mid to upper 70s. That is air more typical of the tropics than the American interior. In central Indiana, forecasters are talking about extraordinary dew points. The heat index there holds between 105 and 110 every afternoon into Friday. And on Sunday, the whole reservoir of hottest air shifts into the southeast. Atlanta, Savannah, Charlotte, Columbia, Birmingham, that is your peak day. Highs run 10 to 20 degrees above average. Heat index values sit in the 105 to 115 range across the Mid-South, the Southeast and the Mid-Atlantic. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's own holiday outlook framed it plainly. The eastern third of the country runs 10 to 20 degrees above normal Friday and Saturday. Then the furnace door swings toward the southeast on Sunday. The Midwest deserves its own minute here, because that is where this heatwave was born and it is still grinding. Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Louis and Minneapolis have been feeling like triple digits for days. The humidity is so extreme that forecasters compared the air over the region to the Amazon rainforest. That is not a figure of speech. Dew points in the upper 70s produce the same suffocating moisture load you would measure in an equatorial jungle, except draped over corn country. And speaking of corn, this is the season when millions of acres of maturing crops exhale enormous amounts of water vapor every afternoon. Farmers bluntly call the process corn sweat. The fields themselves are humidifying the heat wave. The National Weather Service office in Kansas City told its readers the quiet part directly. The region expects to be locked into a hot and dry pattern through at least Thursday, and probably through Saturday. Locked in. Their words. Summer camps across the Midwest have been cancelled outright, and Chicago opened cooling centres at senior centres, libraries, city colleges, and police stations across the city. Even Florida is in the record conversation, which takes effort in July, because Florida's records are already set at a brutal baseline. As this air mass expands, a few daily records are possible in Key West, Miami, Orlando, and Tampa. So the hottest corner of the country is adding new entries to its book during the same event that is rewriting Washington's. That tells you how few places east of the Rockies escape this dome. By the time Saturday night's fireworks fade, the count is expected to pass 300 broken records. And notice the split inside that number, because it matters. Just over 100 of those are daily record highs. More than 200 of them are record warm overnight lows. The nights are breaking records at twice the rate of the days. Hold on to that fact because it is the hinge of this entire event. Here is the question I want you to answer in the comments, and I genuinely read these. Where are you spending the 4th this year, and what is your forecast high? Drop your city and your number below, because I want to build a picture of just how far this dome reaches into this community. Now let me take you into the part of this forecast that worries me more than any single afternoon high. The nights. A heat wave does its worst damage in the dark. That sounds backwards, so let me explain the mechanism, because once you see it, you will never look at an overnight low the same way again. Your body handles heat the way a battery handles drain. During a hot afternoon, your heart rate rises, your blood vessels dilate, you sweat, and your core works overtime to shed the load. That is survivable, even at 105 as long as the system gets to recharge. The recharge happens at night. When the air drops into the 60s or low 70s, your core temperature settles, your heart rate falls, and your body resets for the next round. Take away the cool night, and the drain never stops. Day 2 starts with a body that never recovered from day 1. Day 3 starts deeper in the hole. That is why the deadliest heat waves in American history were all defined by their nights, not their afternoons. Chicago in 1995, the East Coast in July 2011 and 2012, and the nights in this event are historic. There is my first big word of the video, and I do not use it loosely. On Tuesday, La Crosse, Wisconsin only dropped to 81 degrees overnight. 81. That tied the warmest overnight low ever recorded in La Crosse, in records that go back to 1872. More than 150 years of thermometers in that city, and this week matched the single warmest night in the entire archive. The last time La Crosse had a night like that was the 4th of July, 2012. Rockford, Illinois set a record warm low of 77. Louisville came in at 79, Topeka, Kansas 79, and those fell on a Tuesday, before the core of the heat even reached the East Coast. Now look at what the big cities are facing through Saturday. In the urban cores of Philadelphia, Baltimore, New York, Boston and Washington, overnight lows may struggle to fall below 80 degrees. Some nights they may fail entirely, and the all-time records are within reach. New York's warmest night ever recorded is 84 degrees. Washington's is also 84. Philadelphia's is 83. All three were set during the brutal late July heatwave of 2011. All three are in play this weekend. Read that again. The warmest nights these cities have ever experienced in their entire recorded history are live targets on the country's birthday weekend. Why do the cities stay so hot after dark? Concrete, asphalt, brick and steel spend all day banking solar energy like a kiln. After sunset, they spend the night paying it back out into the streets. That is the urban heat island. And during an event like this, it can hold a downtown 5 to 10 degrees warmer than the surrounding countryside at 2 in the morning. Combine that with dew points in the 70s. That moisture puts a lid over the surface and blocks the ground from radiating its heat to space, and you get nights that never let go. An apartment on the 4th floor of a brick walk-up with no air conditioning does not cool down under those conditions. It just stores Wednesday's heat and adds Thursday's on top. And here is the piece of this that connects directly to the holiday itself. Fireworks happen at night. Millions of people will be outside at 9, 10, 11 o'clock on Saturday, sitting on blankets, standing in crowds. Many of them will assume that because the sun went down, the danger went with it. A National Weather Service forecaster made exactly this point ahead of the weekend. Evening temperatures across the heat dome will still be sitting in the 80s and low 90s, and the humidity keeps the heat index elevated well after dark. The sun going down does not mean it is not hot anymore. This weekend, that sentence is the difference between a good night and an ambulance ride for somebody's grandfather at a fireworks show. The medical math here is unforgiving, and I want to spend one more minute on it because heat gets underestimated every single year. Heat is the #1 weather killer in the United States. Not tornadoes, not hurricanes, not lightning or floods. Heat kills more Americans in an average year than all of those combined. And it does it quietly, one overheated body at a time, which is why it never gets the dramatic coverage a hurricane landfall gets. 2 weeks ago, Europe went through a heat wave of similar character, and the toll is now being counted. More than 1,300 additional deaths, with roughly 1,000 of those in France alone. That happened in modern countries with modern hospitals in the last 2 weeks. The same physics is parked over the eastern United States right now, so know the warning signs because they show up in that order for a reason. Fatigue first, then lightheadedness, then muscle cramps and an upset stomach. If someone near you at a cookout or a fireworks show hits that sequence, get them into shade or air conditioning, get water into them, and do not wait to see if it passes. One more thing before I move on, because this is exactly the kind of quiet detail that tells you how unusual this air mass is. Amtrak does not slow the entire Northeast Corridor for an ordinary hot week. Rail steel expands in extreme heat, and expanded rail can buckle. The engineering thresholds that trigger those speed restrictions exist for events at the far edge of the distribution. Those thresholds are being crossed for 4 consecutive days. The infrastructure itself is telling you what kind of week this is. There is also a hazard in this pattern you cannot feel on your skin, but your lungs will find anyway. Air quality. A dome like this is, by definition, stagnant air. Nothing ventilates. The same air sits over the same cities for days, cooking in intense July sunshine, and that is the exact recipe for ground-level ozone. Vehicle exhaust and industrial emissions that would normally disperse instead bake in place, and by mid-afternoon the ozone numbers climb into ranges that inflame airways. New York officials specifically flagged continuing air quality concerns as this stagnant air mass holds. So if you have asthma, chronic lung disease, or a kid who wheezes on bad days, listen closely. Treat this as an air quality event stacked on top of a heat event. Ozone peaks in the late afternoon and early evening, precisely the hours everyone heads out for holiday festivities. The cleanest air of each day is in the early morning. If breathing is your weak point, that is your window, and the peak heat hours are doubly off limits. One more layer of science before the storms, because this is the single most misunderstood part of every heat wave, and understanding it might genuinely protect you this weekend. The number that matters most this week is not the temperature. It is the dew point. The dew point tells you how much water vapor the air is actually carrying, and it is the honest measurement of misery. A dew point of 60 feels comfortable, 65 feels sticky, 70 feels oppressive. 75 and above is the territory of the deep tropics, and that is where the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and the Mid-Atlantic are living right now, with readings in the mid to upper 70s for days on end. Here is why that number can hurt you. Your body's entire cooling system is evaporation. Sweat forms on your skin, the dry air drinks it, and the evaporation carries heat away from your body. But when the dew point climbs into the 70s, the air is already nearly full of water. Your sweat forms, sits on your skin, and simply stays there. The machinery still runs, your body keeps pumping out moisture and burning energy to do it, but the cooling never happens. You're sweating and gaining heat at the same time. That is why a 95-degree day with a 78 dew point is physiologically more dangerous than 105 degrees in the desert. The desert lets your body work. This air mass does not. That is exactly what the heat index is trying to capture, the combined assault of temperature and moisture on a human body, and it is why the National Weather Service keeps hammering the feels-like numbers this week, rather than the plane temperatures. 100 at the airport is a statistic. 114 on your skin at a parade is a medical situation. There is a threshold in this science called the wet bulb limit. Past that point, even a healthy person resting in shade with unlimited water can no longer shed heat as fast as the air delivers it. This weekend does not reach that theoretical ceiling, but every degree of dew point moves the whole country a step closer to the range where shade and water stop being enough. And this event is running dew points that give the eastern United States far less margin than the raw temperatures suggest. So that is the heat. But a heat dome this strong never works alone. All of that hot, wet, unstable air has to go somewhere at the edges, and where it goes, it explodes. Which brings me to the second act of this holiday weekend, thunderstorms. And for a lot of you, this is the part of the forecast that actually decides whether the fireworks happen at all. Picture the dome as a mountain of hot air sitting over the eastern United States. Storm systems cannot punch through the middle of it, so they ride around the rim like water around a boulder in a stream. Meteorologists call that rim the Ring of Fire, and this week the ring runs from the northern plains across the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. Then it bends down the spine of the Appalachians. Every disturbance that rounds that rim taps into some of the most explosive air on the continent right now. How explosive? The Storm Prediction Center measured mixed-layer instability values over 4,000 joules per kilogram across parts of the region today. For anyone new to that number, 2,000 is a loaded atmosphere. 3,000 gets forecasters leaning forward in their chairs. 4,000 is the atmosphere holding a lit match over a fuel spill. Today, Thursday, a slight risk of severe weather, level 2 of 5, covers an area from the Dakotas into the western Great Lakes. Separate risk zones sit over western Kansas and across the southern Appalachians into the Tennessee Valley. A stalled boundary is draped from southern South Dakota into central Iowa. Storms firing along it are tracking into southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois this afternoon and evening. Large hail and damaging winds are the main threats. The Weather Prediction Center is watching the same corridor for a different reason. Water. The air feeding these storms holds between 1.5 and 2 inches of precipitable water. That is near the top of the climatological range for this region. With instability between 3,000 and 4,000 joules per kilogram, storms will be efficient rain machines. A slight risk of excessive rainfall covers the northern plains and upper Midwest today. On Friday, it shifts across the upper Midwest to the western Great Lakes. Locally, some communities under repeating storms could pick up 3 to 5 inches, so while the East Bakes, parts of Minnesota and Wisconsin, may spend the holiday weekend bailing out. Same weather pattern. 2 completely opposite disasters, separated by a few hundred miles. Then comes Saturday itself, and here the storm forecast lands directly on top of the party. The Storm Prediction Center has already drawn a slight risk area for the 4th of July, and it sits squarely over the mid-Atlantic. Here is their reasoning, and it is worth understanding. Strong afternoon heating of an extremely moist air mass will again build more than 3,000 joules per kilogram of instability. Wind shear will be weak, so these will not be rotating supercells. Instead, the vertical profile of the atmosphere, dry air aloft over a shallow hot layer near the ground, favours what forecasters call downbursts. A downburst is a column of rain-cooled air that collapses out of a storm and slams the ground. It spreads out in all directions with winds that can top 60 or 70 miles per hour in seconds. No warning spiral on radar, no long lead time, just a storm that looks ordinary until the moment it drops its core. With a cold front and a surface trough moving in, storm coverage on Saturday will be greater than Friday. And a few organising clusters are possible. If you are anywhere from central Virginia through Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and into New York on Saturday evening, this is the mechanism that could scatter a fireworks crowd of 10,000 people in 5 minutes. Keep a radar app open on the 4th. I mean that literally. Sunday adds one more chapter. A shortwave trough swings toward the northeast and mid-Atlantic, and by then the front has sagged into the sprawling reservoir of heat and moisture across the east and south. The result is more widespread showers and thunderstorms across much of the eastern and southern United States on July 5th. Isolated to scattered storms also continue from the Central Plains into the Midwest through the whole stretch. So the overall shape of the weekend east of the Mississippi is this. Friday, mostly heat with storms around the northern rim. Saturday, heat plus a real severe threat in the mid-Atlantic. Sunday, the pattern finally starts to buckle and storms spread wide. By the way, storms during a heat wave carry a hazard people forget. When a downburst knocks out power to a neighbourhood sitting at 95 degrees with a dew point of 76, the air conditioning goes with it. In an event like this, a 6-hour power outage is not an inconvenience. For an elderly person alone in a top-floor apartment, it is a medical emergency on a timer. If storms hit your area this weekend, check on your neighbours after the wind stops. That quiet hour after the storm is when the heat gets its opening. Have you ever had a 4th of July show cancelled by weather where you live? Tell me the year and the city in the comments, because I am genuinely curious how many of you have watched this exact collision happen before. Now turn around and face west, because the third front of this holiday weekend is burning, literally. While the east swims through tropical humidity, the west is living the opposite extreme under the same continental pattern. Across the Four Corners region, the air is bone dry, the wind is up, and dangerous fire weather conditions are in effect through Friday. Red flag warnings cover portions of Utah and southern Colorado. Forecasters there are calling for wind gusts up to 45 miles per hour, with relative humidity crashing into the 7 to 12% range. 7% humidity. To put that in context, the inside of your oven on a low setting is not far off. Add a 45 mile per hour gust to fuels that dry, and a single spark can become a running fire line in minutes. And the sparks have already found their fuel. The Cottonwood fire has burned more than 93,000 acres, and roughly 1,200 firefighters and support personnel are working that single incident over the holiday. 93,000 acres is about 145 square miles, larger than the city of Denver. Dry conditions and high winds have driven destructive fire activity in parts of Utah and southern Colorado for days, and fire weather concerns stay elevated across Arizona, eastern Utah, western Colorado, western New Mexico, and parts of southern Wyoming right through the weekend. Now hold that picture in your head and think about what Saturday night means across that landscape. The 4th of July is, every single year, the single biggest night for human-caused fire starts in the western United States. Fireworks, charcoal, hot exhaust pipes on dry grass. This year, that night arrives with red flag conditions, a major fire already running, and thousands of firefighters committed. Every fire agency in the region is saying the same thing, and I will amplify it here. If you are anywhere in the interior west this weekend, leave the fireworks to the professional shows. One bottle rocket in 12% humidity can erase a neighbourhood. The strange mercy in the western forecast is the coastline. From coastal California up through the Pacific Northwest, temperatures this weekend actually run near or even slightly below average, with abundant sunshine along the Pacific. Seattle and Portland may quietly have the most comfortable 4th of July in the country. Meanwhile, Washington, the capital on the other coast, breaks a 107-year-old record. The desert southwest sees its usual early July heat, with slim rain chances outside of afternoon storms popping over eastern Colorado, New Mexico, and West Texas, where an early monsoonal flow of moisture is delivering widely scattered but drenching downpours Thursday and Friday. Those mountain storms carry their own catch. Dry lightning on the high terrain, which is exactly how several western fire seasons have ignited in years past. So take inventory of what this one weather pattern is producing simultaneously. All-time heat records in the east, flash flooding potential in the upper Midwest, downburst risks over the mid-Atlantic on the holiday itself, and explosive fire weather in the west. One ridge of high pressure is conducting all 4 of those orchestras at once. Which raises the obvious question. What built this thing, and why did it park itself over the country's birthday? Let me pull the camera all the way back, because the mechanism is where this story gets genuinely interesting. A heat dome is not a metaphor. It is a physical structure in the atmosphere. And right now, a strong upper-level ridge is anchored across the central and eastern United States like a mountain range made of pressure. Under a ridge like this, air does not rise, it sinks, and sinking air compresses, and compressing air heats. The same way a bicycle pump warms in your hand as you push the piston down, so the dome manufactures heat from the top down while simultaneously acting as a lid. That lid suppresses clouds, which lets the July sun work on the ground at full strength. It suppresses thunderstorms, which removes the natural cooling mechanism of summer, and it traps the humidity rising off the soaked soils and the warm Gulf waters. That moisture folds back down into the surface layer instead of venting upward. Heat in, nothing out. The dome does not just contain the heat wave. The dome is the heat wave, and notice the supporting actor in that process because it connects two halves of this video. The Gulf. The waters of the Gulf are running above average right now. The circulation around the western side of the ridge is drawing that warm, saturated marine air northward day after day. That feed is what sustains the dangerous dew points in the 70s. The same warm Gulf waters doing that job should sound familiar. They are the ones I flagged earlier as the most likely birthplace for homegrown tropical trouble later this season. One body of warm water, two threats on two different timescales. This week it humidifies a heat wave. Later this summer, under the right few quiet days, it could organise something that spins. Keep the Gulf on your mental map all season, I certainly will. The jet stream tells you why it will not move. The jet is the river of fast air that steers weather systems across the continent. And this week it has been shoved far north, running along the United States and Canada border. Every disturbance riding that river gets deflected around the top of the ridge, clips the Dakotas and the Great Lakes, and exits east, never touching the core of the dome. That is why the same cities have now cooked for day after day after day. Nothing in the pattern can reach them. The Weather Prediction Center's extended discussion spells out the eventual escape route, and I will walk you through the timing in a few minutes. But the short version is simple. The ridge holds its grip on the east through the holiday weekend before the pattern finally begins to break early next week. There is one more layer to the mechanism, and it is the one that turns this from a weather story into a climate signal. Nights are warming faster than days across the United States. That is one of the clearest fingerprints in the entire observational record. A moister, warmer baseline atmosphere holds more heat near the surface after sunset. That is exactly why this event is setting twice as many warm overnight records as daytime records. The 100-plus record highs this week are impressive. The 200-plus record warm lows are the actual signature of the era we are in. When La Crosse, Wisconsin ties a night record that stood through 154 years of thermometers, that is not noise. That is the baseline moving underneath us. Before I pull back to the ocean, a quick word about confidence. Because I know some of you are wondering how solid all of this is. Forecast confidence in this event is about as high as our science gets. Heat waves are frankly the easiest extreme weather to predict, because a heat dome is an enormous, slow, stubborn object. A tornado forecast lives or dies on details smaller than a county. A hurricane track wobbles with every eyewall cycle. But a ridge spanning half a continent shows up in every model, every ensemble member, every run, days in advance, and that is exactly what happened here. As far back as last Sunday, the National Weather Service made a striking statement in its official discussion. The guidance was in strong agreement on a potentially record-shattering heatwave across the eastern third of the country for the end of this week. All-time record highs were possible in places. Strong agreement, 5 days out, on all-time records, the American Global Forecast System, the European model. And their ensembles have been locked arm in arm on this ridge for the better part of a week. The uncertainty in this forecast was never whether the heat would come. It was only ever about the last 2 or 3 degrees, and whether individual records fall by a whisker or by a landslide. When every tool in the box paints the same picture that far in advance, you take it at face value and you prepare. That is what the cooling centres, the shortened parades, and the slowed trains are. Institutions taking the models at face value. And that brings me to the biggest player of all, the one sitting 5,000 miles away in the Pacific Ocean, quietly reorganizing the weather of the entire planet while America grills hot dogs, El Nino. If you have watched this channel over the past month, You know where this has been heading. On June 11th, the Climate Prediction Center issued an official El Nino advisory. That declaration ended roughly 2 years without El Nino conditions and confirmed that the warm phase of the Pacific is fully in place. But the advisory itself is not the headline. The headline is the trajectory. In the space of a single month, the official odds of this event reaching the very strong category jumped from 37% to 63%. That is the highest tier that exists, 63%. Forecasters flipped from calling a strong event possible to calling a top-tier event more likely than not in one update cycle. That is a remarkable move for an agency that is institutionally allergic to overstatement. And there is my second big word of the video, which means I am out of them. So you know everything from here forward stands on the numbers alone. Let me define the club this event is trying to join, because membership is genuinely exclusive. A very strong El Nino has a precise definition. The sea surface in the central equatorial Pacific runs at least 2 degrees Celsius above normal, sustained across a full 3-month season. In records going back to 1950, only 6 events have ever reached that level. 1965, 1972, 1982, 1991, 1997, and 2015, 6 times in 3/4 of a century. Each one of those winters rewrote weather patterns worldwide, from flooding in California to drought in Indonesia to the storm tracks over the American South. Sea surface temperatures in the key monitoring regions are already surging to record levels for this time of year. This is one of the fastest developing El Nino onsets I've seen in the modern record. And the ocean is showing no sign of tapping the brakes. So what does a rising super event mean for the rest of this American summer, and especially for hurricane season? This is where the chessboard gets fascinating, because El Nino plays completely opposite moves in the 2 ocean basins that matter to the United States. In the Atlantic, El Nino is a suppressor. The warming Pacific drives changes in the upper atmosphere that pour vertical wind shear across the tropical Atlantic and the Caribbean. Shear is hostile to hurricanes. It tilts developing storms, tears their tops away from their bases, and prevents the neat vertical stacking a hurricane needs to organize. That shear is the main reason the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration issued its quietest Atlantic outlook in years. 55% odds of a below normal season, with 8 to 14 named storms, 3 to 6 hurricanes, and 1 to 3 majors. For scale, an average season produces 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, 3 majors. Colorado State University went even further in its June 10th update, trimming to 11 named storms, 5 hurricanes, just 2 majors, and a seasonal energy index of only 70 units, barely half of an average year. Their analogue years for this season include 1965, 1997, and 2015. Every one of those is a member of the very strong El Nino club I just listed. The forecasters are telling you exactly which script they think this year follows. The season's opening act fit that script perfectly. Tropical Storm Arthur, the first named storm of the Atlantic year, formed on June 17th, ran its brief course, and dissipated without threatening anyone. As of this morning, the National Hurricane Center expects no tropical development in the open Atlantic through the holiday weekend and into early next week. For every beach town from Texas to Maine, that is the best birthday gift in this entire forecast. No storm surge, no rip current machine spinning offshore, no cone of uncertainty hanging over anyone's vacation. But before anyone on the coast fully exhales, I need to hand you the fine print. Because this is the part that separates a smart hurricane season from a lucky one. El Nino shuts down the deep tropics, the long-track storms that march across the Atlantic from Africa. It does far less to prevent what forecasters call homegrown development. Those are the storms that spin up close to home, in the northern Gulf, or along stalled fronts near the southeast coast. Those waters need only a few quiet days to organize a circulation. And notice where the warm water actually is this year. The deep tropical Atlantic is running cool, which is textbook El Nino. But the Gulf and the waters off the southeast are running above average. The fuel is not in the middle of the ocean this year. The fuel is parked next to the coastline. Homegrown storms are usually weaker and shorter lived than the African long trackers, but they come with a brutal trade-off. Lead time. A wave off Africa gives you 10 days of watching. A Gulf spin-up can go from a blob on satellite to a landfalling storm inside 72 hours. 1992 was a strong shear year too, and it produced almost nothing, except one storm named Andrew. It only takes one, and in a season like this, the one is most likely to be born close to shore. Now flip the map to the other ocean, because everything El Nino takes from the Atlantic it hands to the Pacific with interest. While shear strangles storms on the Atlantic side, the eastern and central Pacific get the opposite treatment. Warmer waters, lower shear, and an atmosphere primed for development. History is blunt about what that produces. During the last very strong event in 2015, the eastern Pacific ran at nearly 200% of its normal activity. It spun up 18 named storms and 13 hurricanes, and an almost absurd 9 major hurricanes in a single season. That was the year of Hurricane Patricia, the strongest hurricane ever measured in the Western Hemisphere. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration has already issued outlooks calling for active seasons in both the eastern and central Pacific basins this year. For the mainland United States, Pacific storms are mostly a story of moisture surges and surf. But for the west coast of Mexico, for Hawaii sitting downstream in the central Pacific, and for anyone with summer travel booked along those coastlines, this is shaping up as the basin to respect in 2026. And there is a sneaky domestic angle too. Moisture from decaying Pacific systems regularly gets pulled north into the desert southwest, supercharging the monsoon over New Mexico, Arizona, and West Texas. In an active Pacific year, those drenching mountain downpours I mentioned earlier can turn into genuine flash flood seasons for the interior west. That can happen even while the Atlantic coast enjoys its quietest summer in years. Look further down the calendar and the same Pacific engine keeps running. The Climate Prediction Center gives this El Nino a 96% chance of lasting through the entire winter, from December into February of 2027. If it peaks at the very strong level the current odds favor, the winter ahead of us follows a well-worn script. The subtropical jet stream energizes and drags storm after storm across the southern United States, soaking California, the Gulf Coast, and the southeast, while the northern tier trends milder and drier. Ski country in the upper Midwest suffers, southern reservoirs fill, and the storm track that spent this July 4th weekend deflected into Canada spends January aimed straight at the American South. I will build a full winter outlook when the autumn data firms up, but the pieces are already moving on the board, and this weekend's heat and that future winter are 2 verses of the same Pacific song. There is one more El Nino effect worth putting on your radar for the back half of summer, and it connects straight back to this weekend's heat. El Nino summers tend to energize the subtropical branch of the jet stream and shuffle where the big ridges prefer to anchor. Several of the strong onset years in that club produce the same signature. Persistent mid-continent and eastern ridging, exactly what the United States is under right now. The heat sloshed between the east and the plains as disturbances dented the dome and it rebuilt. In other words, this weekend's pattern may not be a one-off visitor. It may be the opening statement of an El Nino summer that keeps rerunning versions of this setup into August. Watch how quickly the ridge rebuilds after next week's break. That will tell us a lot about the next 60 days. All right, you have the live picture, the birthday forecast, the night threat, the storms, the fires, the machine behind it all, and the ocean pulling the strings. Now let me stitch it into a single roadmap. Here is your day by day, from tonight through the middle of next week, so you know exactly what to expect wherever you're standing. Tonight, Thursday, July 2nd. The Interstate 95 corridor holds in the upper 70s to low 80s overnight, with urban cores in New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, and Washington possibly never dropping below 80. Thunderstorms rumble through the night along the northern rim, from the Dakotas across Minnesota, Wisconsin, and northern Illinois, some of them severe, all of them soaking. If you hear rain on the roof in the upper Midwest tonight, expect to hear it again tomorrow. This boundary is not going anywhere. Friday, July 3rd, the peak day for the Mid-Atlantic. Philadelphia 104 tying its run at history. Washington near 103. New York taking its shot at back-to-back triple digits for the first time in 15 years. Boston hovering near 100. Heat index between 105 and 115 from the Mid-South through the Mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, the northern storm track sharpens. The Weather Prediction Center holds a slight risk of excessive rainfall over the upper Midwest into the western Great Lakes. Locally, 3 to 5 inches can fall where storms train over the same counties. Severe cells carry large hail and damaging wind from Minnesota across Wisconsin into Michigan. The west stays primed for fire through the day, gusts to 45, humidity in the single digits in spots. Friday night, evening storms fire on the dome's northwestern flank while the east endures another 80-degree night. Saturday, July 4th. The birthday itself, Washington 102, the hottest Independence Day in the capital's history if it verifies, breaking 1919. Philadelphia and the urban northeast come off their absolute peak by a degree or two, but stay dangerously hot, mid-90s to near 100. Heat index values hold above 100 for the fireworks hours. The slight risk of severe storms sits over the mid-Atlantic for the afternoon and evening. Downbursts the main threat exactly when the crowds are outside. Storm chances also dot the map from the central plains through the Midwest and along the southeast sea breeze. Across the west, red flag conditions meet amateur fireworks, and fire crews hold their breath. If your show gets a storm delay Saturday evening, that is the atmosphere doing exactly what the outlook drew 3 days in advance, Sunday, July 5th. The pattern begins to buckle. The hottest air slides southeast, putting Atlanta, Savannah, Columbia, and Birmingham in the core 10 to 20 degrees above normal, with heat index values up to 115. To the north, the shortwave trough arrives, and showers and thunderstorms spread widely across the eastern and southern United States. New England and the interior northeast feel the first genuine relief as slightly drier air bleeds in from the northwest. The Midwest continues to ease, with 90s shrinking back toward the Ohio Valley. Monday, July 6th. Relief crosses the Appalachians. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's holiday outlook says it plainly. Cooler air sweeps from the Midwest into the east by Monday. The mid-Atlantic drops out of record territory, and the 90-degree footprint contracts hard. Storms remain scattered from the Mississippi Valley eastward as the front sags through all that leftover moisture. Do not expect crisp autumn air, this is still July. But the difference between 103 and 88 is the difference between danger and a normal summer day. Tuesday and Wednesday, July 7th and 8th. A cold front pushes through the Ohio Valley. Behind it, places like Indiana fall to near or even slightly below normal. That is a stunning turnaround from heat index values of 110 just days earlier. The northeast settles into the 80s. And here is the twist you should watch closely, because the heat does not die. It relocates. The guidance shifts the core of the ridge westward. The bulk of the above-average heat moves into the plains and the interior west for next week. The dome that baked Boston is forecast to reload over Kansas, Colorado, and the northern Rockies. There is real uncertainty in the details. The Weather Prediction Center flags a shortwave dropping into the northwest next Tuesday. Its timing and strength will decide how strong that western ridge gets. But the theme is clear. The furnace changes address. It does not shut off. While we are on the roadmap, here is the rainfall footprint for the next 7 days. Because water is the quiet second story of this week, the heaviest totals stack up along that stalled boundary from the Dakotas through Minnesota and Wisconsin into the western Great Lakes. Repeating storms there can drop 3 to 5 inches locally, and flash flooding is a genuine concern into the weekend. A second footprint builds over the high terrain of the southwest. That early monsoonal feed keeps drenching afternoon downpours going over New Mexico, eastern Arizona, southern Colorado, and west Texas. A third develops across the southeastern Florida as the sea breeze and the sagging front team up from Sunday onward. And in between, under the core of the dome, the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic stay bone dry until the front arrives. Then they flip abruptly to storm chances early next week. If your lawn is brown in Kentucky or Maryland right now, your rain is coming. It is just riding in behind the heat. And beyond that, some of the longer-range guidance hints at heat relief for parts of the Midwest and even the South in the week after the holiday. The West and the Plains take over as the hotspot. Layer the strengthening El Nino on top, and the second week of July looks like a country split in two. Storms and near-normal temperatures across the east, building heat and fire stress across the west. I will be tracking every run of the global forecast system and the European model through that transition, because where the ridge re-anchors will set the table for the rest of July. So what is your relief date? Find yourself on that map. Upper Midwest. Your heat eases this weekend, but your flood risk continues. New England and interior northeast circle Sunday. Interstate 95 corridor, Monday into Tuesday. Ohio Valley, Tuesday into Wednesday. Southeast, you are last in line. Hold on through early next week. Plains and interior west, I am sorry. Your turn in the barrel is just beginning. Drop a comment and tell me which group you're in, and whether you can already feel the difference by the time you watch this. Because those ground reports from this community genuinely sharpen the next forecast. Now I want to slow down and do something I do not usually get to do in a forecast video. I want to walk through 2.5 centuries of Independence Day weather, because the title of this video is a claim, and claims deserve evidence. America has never felt this hot on its birthday. Let me show you the receipts. Start where I started, in 1776. Jefferson's diary entry of 76 degrees was not a fluke of one mild afternoon. Philadelphia in early July of that year was running a stretch of entirely ordinary, even pleasant summer weather. The men in that room wore wool coats and debated with the windows open. The founding generation simply did not experience the kind of atmosphere sitting over their cities this week. The all-time record highs for Philadelphia and Washington, both 106, were not set until the 20th century. The climate those records live in did not exist yet. And here is a piece of 4th of July history that still gives me chills, and it makes this anniversary even stranger. 50 years after that 76-degree afternoon, on July 4th, 1826, the nation's 50th birthday, Thomas Jefferson died at Monticello. That same afternoon, a few hundred miles north in Massachusetts, John Adams died too. The two men who built the Declaration, gone within hours of each other on the exact 50th anniversary of the document. Both reportedly asked after the date as they faded. Americans at the time saw it as something close to Providence. I bring it up because anniversaries of this country have a strange habit of carrying weight, and this one, the 250th, will now carry a different kind of mark. Not a coincidence of great men, but a line in the climate record. The birthday when the capital's thermometer went where it had never gone on the 4th before. Fast forward to 1919, the year that holds Washington's 4th of July record of 100 degrees. That was considered extraordinary. Newspapers covered it. It stood as the benchmark through the Dust Bowl, through the post-war boom, through every heat wave of the 20th century. 107 consecutive Independence Days have come and gone in the capital without touching it. Saturday's forecast beats it by 2 degrees. Then 1930, the marker for Washington's hottest 3-day stretch. The one this week is challenging. That summer sat on the doorstep of the hottest, most brutal decade in American climate history. This forecast reaches past 2011, past 1995, past 1966. It goes all the way to the edge of the Dust Bowl era for its comparison. That is how you know you're watching something genuinely rare. And the modern benchmarks tell their own story. July 2011, the heat wave that set the all-time warm night records of 84 in New York and Washington, and 83 in Philadelphia. Those are the records this weekend is actively threatening. July 2012, the last time Central Park saw 100 degrees before today, and the event Virginia forecasters now reach for as their worst-case comparison, the one that killed more than 30 people across 4 states. Chicago, 1995, the deadliest single heat event in modern American history. More than 700 dead in one city in 1 week, an event defined, again, by its nights. Every one of those benchmarks is on the table this weekend somewhere in the forecast. Not one of them fell on the country's birthday. This one is. Here is the honest, careful version of the claim, because you know I do not oversell. Somewhere in America, on some 4th of July, an individual thermometer has certainly read hotter than the numbers I've shown you today. A desert town, a plains heat burst, a Dust Bowl afternoon. But measure it as a national event. Count the people inside dangerous heat, the record warm nights, the capital city benchmarks falling on the holiday itself. By those measures, the country as a whole has never experienced an Independence Day like the one arriving Saturday. 2 out of 3 Americans under one dome, the capital breaking a 107-year-old holiday record, the founding city chasing its all-time endurance streak. On the 250th anniversary of all anniversaries, the symbolism writes itself, and the data backs it up. Maybe part of you still hears all this and thinks a heat wave is just summer being summer. If so, I want you to look across the Atlantic one more time, because Europe just finished living the preview. 2 weeks ago, a dome of similar character parked over Western Europe. Cities broke records that had stood for generations. And now the accounting has arrived, the quiet kind that shows up in health ministry spreadsheets weeks after the sky clears. Remember the excess death figures I gave you earlier, more than 1,000 in France alone. Those were not people struck by lightning or swept away by floods. They were people whose bodies simply ran out of margin. In apartments, in care homes, on ordinary streets, while the weather map showed nothing but sunshine. That is the signature of heat. It kills without wreckage. There is no debris field to film, no flattened town for the cameras. That is why a heat wave that takes 1,000 lives gets a fraction of the attention of a hurricane that takes 50. The United States is walking into the same kind of air mass with the same kind of vulnerable populations. The difference between our outcome and theirs is not the forecast. The forecast is done, and it is what it is. The difference is what 165 million people do with the information between now and Sunday. That is not me being dramatic. That is just the arithmetic of heat, and the arithmetic is negotiable right up until it is not. Before I close, let me arm you for the weekend, because a forecast you cannot act on is just trivia. Here is how you get through the hottest birthday in American history in one piece. First, respect the clock. The most dangerous window each day runs from noon to about 7 in the evening, but this event does not release you at sunset. If you are doing anything physical, yard work, a run, loading the car for the lake, do it before 9 in the morning. The morning is the only honest part of these days. Second, drink ahead of your thirst. By the time you feel thirsty in a 110 heat index, you're already behind. Water or electrolyte drinks steadily, all day. Go easy on the alcohol at the cookout because alcohol dehydrates you exactly when your body can least afford it. And most heat collapses at holiday events have a cooler involved. Third, never, under any circumstances, leave a child or a pet in a vehicle, even for 5 minutes, even with a window cracked. In this air mass, a parked car passes lethal temperatures faster than a song on the radio finishes. And check the pavement for your dog. If the back of your hand cannot rest on the asphalt for 7 seconds, their paws cannot either. Fourth, know your buildings. Maybe your home has no air conditioning and holds above 90 indoors. Then a cooling centre, a library, a mall, or a friend's house for the peak afternoon hours is not weakness, it is strategy. New York opened hundreds of centres for exactly this reason. Use them. Fifth, be a node in the safety net. The people who die in heat waves are overwhelmingly older, alone, and unseen. One knock on a door. One phone call to an elderly parent or the widower down the street. One question, is your air conditioning running? That is the entire intervention. It costs you 90 seconds. In Chicago in 1995, the difference between neighborhoods with high death tolls and low ones was not income or geography. It was whether people checked on each other. And sixth, for the fireworks themselves. Hydrate before you go, bring water with you, pick a spot near shade or an exit, and keep one eye on radar if you're in that mid-Atlantic risk zone. If a storm approaches, leave early. No show is worth a downburst in an open field. And seventh, have a power failure plan, because this is the scenario nobody rehearses. The grid across the eastern half of the country will spend 4 straight days near maximum strain. Tens of millions of air conditioners will run flat out from morning until midnight. Layer scattered downburst-producing storms on top of a strained grid, and localized outages this weekend are not a possibility. They are a near certainty somewhere. So decide now what you would do if your power dropped at 4 in the afternoon on Saturday. Fill water bottles and freeze them tonight. They become both cold packs and drinking water. Know which room in your home stays coolest. Usually the lowest floor, north side, away from the sun. Keep your phone charged and a battery pack ready. You may need to find the nearest cooling centre if the outage stretches past a couple of hours, and set a hard limit for yourself in advance. If your indoor temperature passes 90 and the power is not coming back, you leave. A car with air conditioning, a friend's house, a mall, anywhere. People die in heat waves because they wait inside for the power to return. Do not negotiate with a hot house. Before I wrap, let me rattle through the 3 questions filling my inbox this week, quickly and honestly. First question, is this climate change? The careful answer is that no single hot weekend is climate change, the same way no single home run is a hitting streak. Heat domes have always existed, and July has always been capable of brutality. 1919 and 1930 prove that. But the loading of the dice is measurable. Heat waves in the United States today arrive more often, run hotter, and above all stay warmer at night than the same patterns did decades ago. 200 record warm nights against 100 record hot days in a single week. That is exactly the ratio the physics predicts on a warming planet. So the honest sentence is this: the pattern is weather. The extra degrees, especially after dark, carry a fingerprint. Second question, will the whole summer be like this? Not continuously, no. You saw the relief timeline, most of the East returns to ordinary July by the middle of next week. But the setup that built this dome, a strengthening El Nino, warm Gulf waters, a northward displaced jet, does not disappear with one cold front. Expect the ridge to reload, first over the plains and west next week and plausibly back east in later rounds. Think of this weekend as round one of a long fight, not the whole match. Third question. Should I cancel my 4th of July plans? For most healthy people, no. Adjust them. Shift the cookout later, park near shade, double the water, keep the radar app open in the mid-Atlantic, and skip the backyard fireworks out west. The people who genuinely should change plans are the ones this heat targets. The elderly, infants, outdoor workers on long shifts, and anyone whose medications or conditions fight their cooling system. For them, an indoor birthday with the fireworks on television is the right call this year, and there is no shame in it. The country has had 249 other birthdays and will have plenty more. Let me land this plane, and let me do it the way we started. With a man and a thermometer. 250 years ago, a scientist who happened to be founding a country thought the weather mattered enough to write down, even on the busiest day of his life. Jefferson kept that diary for decades, tens of thousands of observations, because he believed you could not understand a place without measuring its sky. Every number I have given you today exists because generations of people after him kept writing the sky down. The 102 in Washington, the 104 in Philadelphia, the 81-degree night in La Crosse. Every single day, through wars and depressions and quiet ordinary decades, somebody wrote it down. That unbroken chain of measurements is the only reason we can make today's claim with evidence instead of vibes. America has never felt this hot on its birthday. The record book is the birthday gift, honestly. 2.5 centuries of a country watching its own weather. This weekend, that book gets some pages nobody alive has seen written before. So here is where I leave you. Stay ahead of the heat, not behind it. Water before thirst, shade before noon, and one phone call to somebody who might be alone in a hot room. Keep a radar eye open Saturday evening if you are anywhere near that mid-Atlantic storm zone, and if you are out west, please let the professionals light the sky this year. Tomorrow I will be watching 3 things very closely. Whether New York and Philadelphia lock in those back-to-back triple-digit days for the first time in 15 years, whether Saturday's storm risk over the mid-Atlantic sharpens or shifts, and the very first signs of that ridge beginning its move west. Because where it lands next week sets up the entire next chapter of this El Nino summer. If this breakdown helped you plan your weekend, a like genuinely helps this analysis reach more people before Saturday. And if you want the follow-up the moment it drops, you know where the subscribe button lives. One last number to carry with you. 76 degrees, 1776. 104, 2026. Same city, same holiday. 28 degrees apart. Happy 250th America. Stay cool out there, stay safe under the fireworks, and I will see you tomorrow.